I am Air Vice Marshal Soni. I recently retired from the Air Force after 38 years of service. I have been doing this online teaching with UPES for the last 2-3 years. Main area of interest of mine is aviation management. Today we will be talking about airport rescue and firefighting, which is also given in detail in Chapter 9, Annexure 14 of ICAO, that is International Civil Aviation Organization Regulations. So, overview of today's lecture. First, we will talk about airdrome emergency planning, level of protection and extinguishing media, rescue and firefighting requirements, and disabled aircraft removal. So the objective of this session is to give participants an understanding of aerodrome emergency planning, airport categorization, and rescue and firefighting requirements, which are given in the Chapter 9 of Annexure 14 of ICAO regulations. In aerodrome emergency planning, the topics that we will cover are objectives, types of emergencies, emergency operation center and command post, emergency communication systems, aerodrome emergency exercises, and emergencies in difficult environments. Now, aerodrome emergency planning is the process of preparing an aerodrome to cope with an emergency occurring at the aerodrome or in its vicinity. To minimize the effects of an emergency, particularly in respect of lives, such planning is required. And also it is required so that the aircraft operations can be maintained. The aerodrome emergency plan sets forth the procedures for coordinating the response of different aerodrome agencies and of those agencies in the surrounding community that could be of assistance in responding to the emergency. This is the main idea of aerodrome emergency plan. Now, the aerodrome emergency plan shall be established at an aerodrome commensurate with the aircraft operations and other activities conducted at the aerodrome. The picture shows the accident that happened in Mangalore a long time back, where the touchdown was a little delayed and the aircraft went over the hill. Now, what are the types of emergencies that are required to be known about? So, the aircraft emergencies is by itself aircraft emergencies. There can be many aircraft emergencies, fire or normal landing emergency or anything. Sabotage, including bomb threats, then unlawfully seized aircraft, dangerous goods occurrences, building fires in the aerodrome, natural disasters, and then public health emergencies. These are the different types of emergencies for which we have to cater, not only for aircraft emergencies. Now, this aerodrome emergency plan document shall include at least the following: types of emergencies planned, agencies involved in the plan, responsibilities and roles of each agency, the emergency operations center and the command post for each type of emergency. This will come as part of the responsibilities. information on names and telephone numbers of offices or people to be contacted in case of a particular emergency, and a grid map of aerodrome and its immediate vicinity. All these are required to be included in the aerodrome emergency plan document. So, who are all involved in the aerodrome emergency planning? So on the aerodrome, the agencies are the aircraft operator, the security services, police, the aerodrome administration, medical and ambulance services, air traffic control. So these 7 main agencies are involved in the aerodrome emergency planning. Now, the agencies which are involved of the aerodrome are the city fire department, police, health authorities of the city, Coast Guard or Harbour Patrol, and military. So these 5 agencies, some of them may not be required for each emergency, but these are always involved in the initial aerodrome emergency planning, so that they can take action as required if they are asked to take action. Now, emergency operations center and command post. Now, a fixed emergency operations center and a mobile command post, as shown in the picture, should be available for use in an emergency. The emergency operations center shall be a part of the aerodrome facilities and shall be responsible for overall coordination and general direction. Here, a single person is to assume control so that there are no ambiguities in orders. The command post should be capable of moving rapidly to the site of an emergency and should undertake the local coordination of those agencies reporting to the emergency. So, all the people who are required to take action in that particular type of emergency will report to the command post, and here also one person will assume control of the whole operation. Now, how is the communication established between EOC, CP, that is Emergency Operations Center, Command Post, and the other participating agencies? So, adequate communication systems linking the Command Post and EOC with each other and with participating agencies must exist in accordance with the plan and consistent with the particular requirements of the aerodrome. So the EOC and CP will communicate with each other. The CP will communicate with the firefighting team, the medical team, the security team, as shown in the picture. No, it is not necessary, not enough that you have an emergency plan. That plan has to be exercised also. So emergency exercises have to be planned so that the plan is tested. So the plan will be tested by conducting a full-scale aerodrome emergency exercise at intervals not exceeding 2 years, and a partial emergency exercise in the intervening year to ensure that any deficiencies found during the full-scale aerodrome or aerodrome emergency exercise have been corrected, or also a series of modular tests commencing in the first year and concluding in a full-scale aerodrome emergency exercise at intervals not exceeding 3 years, and reviewed thereafter or after an actual emergency so as to correct any deficiency found during such exercises or actual emergency. So the emergency the exercise have to be exercised emergencies so that you are prepared with the actual action that is to be taken when there is an actual emergency. The purpose of a full-scale exercise is to ensure the adequacy of the plan to cope with different types of emergencies. The purpose of a partial exercise is to ensure the adequacy of the response to the individual participating agencies and components of the plan, such as the communication system. We have to also see that the communications are proper between the agencies. The purpose of modular test is to enable concentrated effort on specific components of established emergency plans. So these modular tests could be checking the communication system, or checking the firefighting system, or checking the response of the police, or checking the response of medical establishment. So these are the modular tests. Now, there is one more thing in this. It is possible that the emergencies take place in difficult environments. So the plan shall include availability of and coordination with appropriate specialist rescue services to be able to respond to emergencies where an aerodrome is located close to water and swampy areas, and where a significant portion of approach or departure operation takes place over such areas. So a photograph of a difficult airport is indicated. So one emergency may take place at the sea, or near the sea, on the beach, or on the swampy areas next to the airport. So we have to be prepared for all such eventualities. At such locations, that is, the difficult environments, the aerodrome emergency plan shall include the establishment, testing, and assessment at regular intervals of a predetermined response of the specialist rescue service. Because at such difficult environments, there will be special rescue services will be required, like Coast Guard or such. Now, what is the level of protection and extinguishing media that is required at a aerodrome? So this will depend on the topics that are listed. That is, it will depend on the aerodrome category, the level of protection that needs to be provided, the principal and complementary extinguishing agents that are required, minimum usable amounts of extinguishing agents that are required, and reserve stock. Now, how do we categorize an airport? The airport is categorized based on the types and size of aircraft operating at the aerodrome. So, category 1 is a aerodrome where the overall length of the aeroplane does not exceed 9 meters, and with a maximum fuselage width of 2 meters. That is small aircraft. Aerodrome is 9 to 12 meters aeroplane overall length, and has maximum fuselage width 2 meters. Category 3 is 12 to 18 meters of aircraft length and the 3 meters fuselage width. Category 4 is 18 meters up to and up to 24 meters, 18 to 24 meters with maximum fuselage width of 4 meters. Category 5 is aeroplane overall length 24 to 28 meters and maximum fuselage width 4 meters. Category 6, 28 meters to 39 meters and fuselage width of 5 meters. Category 7, 39 to 49 meters, fuselage width of 5 meters. Category 8, 49 to 61 meters, with fuselage width 7 meters. Category 9, 61 to 76 meters, with fuselage width of 7 meters. And category 10, 76 to 90 meters, maximum fuselage width of 8 meters. So these are the different types of aircraft shown with the relative sizes. So you know how much variation is there between sizes of aircraft. So the category shall be determined based on the longest aeroplane normally using the aerodrome and their fuselage width. That is what we got listed just now. And to categorize the aeroplanes using the aerodrome, first evaluate the overall length, and second the fuselage. So this first the overall length is more important. So overall length of the aircraft is shown in the figure, and fuselage width is also shown in the figure. Now the aerodrome category shall be determined from the before mentioned table that we saw just now and shall be based on the longest aeroplanes normally using the aerodrome with their fuselage width, except that where the number of movements of aeroplanes in the highest category normally using the aerodrome is less than 700 in the busiest consecutive 3 months, the level of protection provided shall not be less than one category below the determined category. So slightly confusing jargon, but what it means is the highest category of aircraft that we find, and we say that this will be the highest category of aerodrome. There, the biggest aeroplane should have at least 700 operations in consecutive 3 months. If it is less, then maybe we can consider the aerodrome category to be one less than the category that we are calculating. So going back to this thing, so if a 24 to 28 meter aircraft is the normal maximum operator, but if that 24 to 28 meter aircraft does not operate more than 700 times in consecutive 3 months, then you can categorize the aerodrome as category 4 instead of category 5. So after selecting the category appropriate to the longest aeroplane's overall length, if that aeroplane's fuselage width is greater than the maximum width, then the category for that aeroplane shall actually be one category higher. So it is the fuselage width which is the dominant factor in determining the aerodrome category. So while selecting the category, first we select as per the length, and if the length and if the fuselage is higher than the length category, then we have to take the higher category. So once again, going back to this thing. So if we decide, let's say 28 to 39 meters, the category as 6, but if the maximum fuselage width is more than 5 meters, then we have to category 7. So during anticipated periods of reduced activity, the level of protection available shall be no less than needed for the highest category of aeroplane planned to use the aerodrome during that time, irrespective of the number of movements. So there will be some times where the movement of aircraft is less, but that does not mean that the aerodrome category should be reduced. Like if what we said that less than 700 activities, but if that is as an exception only. If it doesn't happen normally, then we should stick to the higher category of aerodrome. Before going to firefighting, let us first understand the chemistry of fire. What is fire? Fire is a very common chemical reaction. It needs fuel or any combustible matter, heat and oxygen. When there is a chain reaction in the burning process of a flaming combustion takes place, otherwise the fire remains as a glowing substance. And fire can be controlled by eliminating oxygen, heat or fuel. What are the classes of fire? Class A fire is fire that occurs in combustible materials like mattresses, cloth, books, or such matters which produce ash. So all class A fires leave embers. So we have to be careful that the embers are also put out, otherwise they will again catch fire. Class B occurs with inflammable liquid substances like fuel and similar petroleum-based products. Class C is electrical fires. Class D is fires with combustible metals like titanium, magnesium, etc. The extinguishing agents that are used in the firefighting: water, aqueous film forming foam, that is called AFFF in short, carbon dioxide, halon, and potassium bicarbonate. Now, what are the types of extinguishing agents? Principal agents produce a permanent control for several minutes or longer. Foam is again a permanent control. It meets performance level A, routine foam, performance level B, aqueous film forming foam, and foam meeting performance level C. There are the three different types of foam. In complementary agents, rapid fire and flame suppression capability, but offers transient control only, like DCP, which is also dry chemical powder. Okay, now, these are the minimum usable amounts of extinguishing agents which should be there on the firefighting equipment. This is a big table, and I'll let you read it for some time. As already shown there, the quantities of water shown in column 2, 4 and 6 are based on the average overall length of planes in the given category. So it is the category which controls the quantity of water shown. So the firefighting equipment or the vehicles that are used, they must have all these foam meeting performance level A, level B, level C, water, all those things in the same formula as that is being given in the chart. So rescue and firefighting vehicles should carry water, foam and complementary extinguishing agents, which were listed in the last chart. Where dry chemical used as complementary extinguishing agent, it should be compatible with the foam. It should not happen that when it's mixed with the foam, Both the principal and complementary extinguishing agents shall be provided at an aerodrome, that is water and DCP. The complementary extinguishing agent shall be a dry chemical powder suitable for extinguishing hydrocarbon fires. When selecting dry chemical powders for use with foam, care must be exercised to ensure compatibility. That is what we just talked. A reserve supply of foam concentrate and complementary agent equivalent to 200 and 100% of the quantities of these agents respectively to be provided in the rescue and firefighting vehicles. The foam concentrate carried on fire vehicles in excess of the quantity identified in table can contribute to the reserve. Where a major delay in the replenishment of the supply is anticipated, the amount of reserve supply shall be increased as determined by the risk assessment. This was given in the chart that I showed just. Now we will go to actual rescue and firefighting. The application, the objective, the rescue equipment, response time, access roads, number of rescue and firefighting vehicles, personnel and training. The principal objective of a rescue and firefighting service is to save lives in the event of an aircraft accident or incident occurring at or in the immediate vicinity of an aerodrome. ARFF, like I said, aerodrome rescue and firefighting. The response time. This is considered to be the time between initial call to the ARFF service and the time when the first responding vehicle is in position to apply foam solution at a rate of at least 50% of the discharge rate of the aerodrome category. This is the response time. The definition of this is given. Now, what is to be expected from ARFF? If time permits, ARFF will be at a predetermined standby location for each runway. So, if we already know that aircraft with an emergency is coming for landing, the ARFF can be pre-positioned so that the response time can be reduced. If significant problem, that is fire, smoke, expect ARFF truck to meet you head on after you have ceased movement. So that is what is there. So the ARFF truck is positioned in such a way that when the aircraft comes to a halt, the truck should meet the aircraft head on. Not a collision, just meet so that they are in front. And a foam blanket is required to be immediately applied by the team. And a rescue of the people if they are incapacitated. So what is now defined? We will define the operational objective of the ARFF. The operational objective of the ARFF service shall be to achieve a response time not exceeding 3, ideally it should be 2 minutes to any point of each operational runway in optimum visibility and surface condition. Now, what is optimum visibility and surface condition? It is daytime, good visibility, no precipitation, there is no rain, with normal response route which is free from ice, snow or water. In such a condition, the ARFF shall be able to achieve a response time of Ideally 2 minutes, not exceeding 3 minutes. So all these rescue and firefighting equipment services shall be provided at an aerodrome. And it is intended that the fire station housing these organizations be normally located on the aerodrome itself. Although an off-aerodrome location is not precluded provided the response time can be met. So if the response time can be met, it can be located, especially this is possible perhaps at smaller airports where in the airport itself there is not much of place available for the fire station. It can be located outside, but it should be so well connected that the response times for attending emergencies is met. All ARFF vehicles shall normally be housed in a fire station. The fire station shall be located in the middle of the runway so that the access for ARFF vehicles into the runway area is direct and clear, requiring a minimum number of turns. The satellite fire stations will be provided whenever the response time cannot be achieved from a single fire station. This is especially when the major airports, where the airport itself is so big that a central main fire station may not be able to achieve the appropriate response times. So we have satellite fire stations at locations from where access is easy. This is a typical location chart of fire fighting stations. No, emergency access roads also required to be provided on an aerodrome where terrain conditions permit their construction so as to facilitate achieving minimum response time. Particular attention shall be given to the provision of ready access to approach areas up to 1000 meters from the threshold or at least within the aerodrome boundary. So the picture shows the approximate distances, and where a fence is provided, the need for convenient access to outside areas shall be taken into account. The gates have to be provided in such a way. Aerodrome service roads may also serve as emergency access roads when they are suitably located and constructed. Emergency access roads shall be capable of supporting the heaviest vehicle and usable in all weather conditions. Vehicles should not bog down in case of rain, water, snow on these roads. Roads within 90 meters of a runway shall be surfaced to prevent surface erosion and the transfer of debris to the runway. Sufficient vertical clearance shall be provided from overhead obstructions for the largest vehicle. So all the overhead cables and all have to be avoided. Now, communication and alerting. A discrete communication system shall be provided linking a fire station with control tower, any other fire station on the aerodrome, and the ARFF vehicles. An alerting system for ARFF personnel capable of being operated from that station shall also be provided at the fire station, at any other fire station on the aerodrome, and the aerodrome control tower. So the communication system should be discrete, that is standalone, so that it does not, nothing else interferes with this communication and also the alerting system. Now, based on the aerodrome category that we discussed earlier, the minimum number of ARFF vehicles provided at an aerodrome shall be in accordance with the following table. So, for aerodrome category up to 5, one vehicle is mandatory. For 6 and 7 categories, 2 vehicles are mandatory. For 8, 9, 10, the mandatory vehicle requirements are 3, 4, and 5. So, aerodrome category 10, they have to be having at least 5 rescue and firefighting vehicles. This chart is a little hazy, but I'm sure you can make out what is there. These are the characteristics of rescue and firefighting vehicles. What are the remaining requirements, like the range of this thing, then discharge capability of the foam, top speeds, all-wheel drive capability. So, like these are the various categories, various requirements of the vehicles. Here, like top speed is indicated 105 kilometers per hour. Nowadays, many vehicles go more than that also. Now, training of these personnel, all ARFF personnel shall be properly trained and made competent to perform their duties in an efficient manner and shall participate in live fire drills commensurate with the types of aircraft and types of ARFF equipment in use at the aerodrome, including pressure-fed fuel fires. Fires associated with fuel discharge under very high pressure from a ruptured fuel tank are known as pressure fuel. So when the refueling of aircraft is going on, the fuel is put into the aircraft at very high pressure. So the pipeline ruptures and there is a fire. This is known as pressure-fed fuel fire. Now, during flight operations, sufficient trained and competent personnel should be designated and be readily available to ride the rescue and firefighting vehicles and to operate the equipment at maximum capacity. These trained personnel should be deployed in a way that ensures that minimum response time can be achieved and that continuous agent application at the appropriate rate can be fully maintained. Number of personnel on each vehicle is also to be fixed, and some minimum personnel have to be provided on each vehicle so that the operation of the vehicle is not hampered. Consideration should also be given for personnel to use hand lines, ladders, and other rescue and firefighting equipment normally associated with aircraft rescue and firefighting operations. In determining the minimum number of personnel required to provide for rescue, a task resource analysis should be completed and the level of staffing documented in the aerodrome manual. This is what I was telling earlier. The number of people on each firefighting vehicle have to be calculated depending on the response required and the equipment, how the equipment is used. All responding rescue and firefighting personnel shall be provided with protective clothing and respiratory equipment to enable them to perform their duties in an effective manner. So some of the protective clothing is shown here. He is carrying oxygen cylinders and fireproof dress so that when he goes near the aircraft on fire, he himself does not get injured. And the people have to be trained to work with all this equipment in their body. So what are the rescue equipments? These rescue equipment have to be provided on the vehicles. Some of them are indicated in the picture. This airport service manual is part of the ICAO regulation. Now we come to disabled aircraft removal. So in this we have an introduction and general requirements of a disabled aircraft removal. Disabled aircraft removal is an important phase because this will ensure continuous and full use of the runway and the aerodrome. Aircraft may become immobilized on an aerodrome for a number of reasons, ranging from major accidents to more minor incidents involving runway excursions or burst tires. It is vitally important that if a disabled aircraft is interfering with the movement of other aircraft, it should be expeditiously removed. And it is the responsibility of the registered aircraft owner to arrange for removal of aircraft. So the responsibility may be with the aircraft operator, but finally it is done by the ARFF team. A plan for the removal of a disabled aircraft on or adjacent to the movement area shall be established for an aerodrome, and a coordinator needs to be designated to implement the plan as and when necessary. Now, this disabled aircraft removal plan shall be based on the characteristics of the aircraft that may normally be expected to operate at the aerodrome and include, among other things, a list of equipment and personnel on or in the vicinity of the aerodrome which would be available for such purpose, and arrangements for the rapid receipt of aircraft recovery equipment kits available from other aerodromes. It is possible that some of the equipments are not available at a particular airport, so it should be quickly obtained from the nearby aerodrome and then as required. Water rescue operations. And the aerodromes, like what we saw in the picture, there is a possibility that the aircraft may land in water. In water landings, because the rescue operations get complicated. There is also a degree of urgency in water rescue operations. So the team should not get caught up in the frenzy. There could be fuel on the water, which will be a hazard, and the airport emergency plan should provide for such events by establishing response coordination and communication with water rescue teams like the Coast Guard or the water police or any such people. In water, most victims may rescue themselves if they are capable. But aquatic rescue is a specialized field and must consist of people who are able to use the water in a better way. So adequate training should be completed before embarking on these missions. So before concluding, let us go through once again about what we saw in short time. Just a review of what we saw today. So the airport rescue and firefighting is given in chapter 9 annex 14 of ICAO regulations. So today we will be talking of types of emergency, the emergency operations center, the command post, communication systems, exercises, and emergencies in difficult environments. So planning is required to ensure that when the actual emergency takes place, there are not many problems. So types of emergencies, not only aircraft emergencies, sabotage, unlawfully seized aircraft, dangerous goods, building fires, natural disasters, public health emergencies. In this, of course, we are not discussed about the other things because they are not exactly the problems of airdrome rescue and firefighting teams. There are other people like civil police, civil administration involved in this. So those we will not discuss in this. That is why we are not discussing this. So the plan should indicate types of emergencies and agencies involved in the plan. So these are the aerodrome emergencies. On the aerodrome, agencies involved like ATC, ARFF, operator, security, police, aerodrome administration, medical. And off the aerodrome emergencies, Coast Guard, City Fire Department, police, health, and military. The communication between the emergency operations control, command post, and participant agency is essential and should be maintained. All the emergencies have to be exercised at least once in 2 years, full scale exercise, and small modular tests must be conducted at very short times. The purpose of this is to ensure adequacy of the plan. So this is what when we talked about water rescue, such type of aerodrome, there will be water rescue involved always, most of the times. In this we will talk about, we have talked about the level of protection and extinguishing media at the runway firefighting vehicles. This depends on the category of the aerodrome, depending on the size of the aircraft. So, like as we saw, airports are categorized in categories 1 to 10, depending on the size. And this is based on the longest aeroplanes normally using the aerodrome. What is fire that we saw? It's a chemical reaction and it can be controlled by eliminating oxygen, heat, or fuel. The different types of classes of fire: Class A, material; Class B, fuel; Class C, electrical fire; Class D, combustible metals like titanium and magnesium. The extinguishing agents: water, AFFF, aqueous film foaming foam; carbon dioxide, halon, potassium nitrate. So types. This is the quantities that should be carried depending on the aerodrome category. So this is the type of equipment, type of vehicle for rescue and firefighting. reserve supply of the equipment, extinguishing agents has to be carried at the airport and their aerodrome vehicles. This is different types of rescue and firefighting equipment that we saw. This is objective of the ARFF, the response time of the ARFF. Aqueous AFFF, aqueous film forming film. So the operational objective of the ARFF. Response time should be not more than 3, ideally 2 minutes. So all these fighting equipment should be provided at aerodrome depending on the category of aircraft, and there should be adequate fire stations once again depending on the size of the aerodrome. Locations of fire stations, different places. Access roads for the runway. The types of access roads that need to be provided and their capacity. The communication system for the internal communication as well as alerting system from the tower. Number of firefighting vehicles that should be provided depending on the category of the aerodrome. Characteristics, speeds, and other capacities of the firefighting vehicles. Then training of the ARFF personnel is necessary. Minimum number of people that are required for each have to be calculated, and they should be there available on each vehicle. But they should have adequate protective clothing. They should have sufficient rescue equipment. Then also, like what we saw, there is a requirement of disabled aircraft removal to continue operations at the aerodrome. Various equipment that are required. Cranes, airbags. And water rescue operations, what we saw is necessary. Thank you.